Okay, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second of the hotel seminar sessions that we running from the Institute of Hospitality. My name's Philippe Rossiter. I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Institute of Hospitality, there's a small brochure on your desk that gives you a bit of a background to who we are and what we do. We're established as a not-for-profit organisation based in the UK, but with members around the world. We've been around for over 70 years, and our prime objects are the promotion of best practice and the advancement of education in hospitality management. And we have members across all sectors of the industry, not just hotels, and at every level, so from students to some of the senior players in the industry. Have a lot to do as an interface between the educational world and also the industry, and have a lot of relationships with hotel schools, again, around the world. As I said, our kind of raison d'etre is the promotion of best practice, the advancement of education in hospitality management, and that's the underpinning reason as to why we've been involved for the third year at the World Travel Market in delivering these seminar sessions, and we've got 3 more tomorrow. This particular session is one that always attracts a lot of interest in the media, and its title is a bit broad-based, and you'll hear from the panel in a minute that they all come at the particular topic from a different perspective, and you can see at one level the risk management is all about the minimising of risk, whether it's a financial risk, whether it's a health and safety risk, whether it's a security risk, and that can be all sorts of things. It could be fire safety, it could be terrorist, whatever. The whole subject is pretty broad. And before we get into that, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves very briefly so that you know who they are and what they do in terms of this particular subject. So perhaps in no particular order, but perhaps starting with Paul at the far end. Paul Moxness.
Yes, good afternoon. Paul Moxness. I'm Vice President Safety and Security at the Carlson Residor Hotel Group, and I also lead the Global Safety, Security and Crisis Council for Carlson Companies in Minneapolis. I'm based in Brussels.
I am Alex Paraskevas. I'm a senior lecturer in strategic risk management at the Oxford School of Hospitality Management.
Hello, I'm Joy Prejek. I'm a Vice President of Fraud Risk Management with American Express, looking after both the issuing and acquiring businesses for Europe, Middle East and Africa.
My name is Philip James. I'm a partner at Pitmans Solicitors. I co-head up the technology group and have a specific interest in technology, data protection and privacy, and data security. We advise clients on general sort of technology and data protection and contractual negotiations and risk. The particular areas which are of interest are sort of supply chains and managing risk in supply chains where data and information is concerned. And we advise both sort of customers and suppliers in that area.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bill Fairweather. I'm the chairman of the Institute of Hotel Security Management. It basically is a collection of security personnel throughout the UK and globally. We get together regularly. We disseminate information regarding crime, and we share information regarding best practice, and we obviously serve the hotel and catering industry. I also sit on I'm chair of the Fraud Forum, which is part of Operation Sterling, which is a Metropolitan Police initiative regarding fraud in all sections of businesses throughout the UK.
Thank you very much, panel. The way we're going to run this session is that I'd like you, and the panel would like you to participate as much as possible. So please, at any stage, if you've got a burning question, please put up your hand. We have a roving mic, and we can engage in a discussion. I find these sessions are much more useful when we have a proper sort of question and answer session than just the audience perhaps just sitting listening and never getting their particular question addressed, and actually the whole subject becomes much more animated. As I referred to earlier, the the broad amount of risks that are sort of challenging the industry. It's always been a risky business, but I wouldn't say the risks are getting any greater, but they're becoming very different in many ways. And the rise of social media, a more savvy customer in many ways, and the pressures that hotel companies have in both meeting customer expectations and shareholders and owners' requirements, and how that impacts on their ability to satisfy risk and to safeguard against any risk, are changing all the time. And particularly in a period when we are severely impacted by the economic recession on a global basis, costs and the kind of the mechanisms and the schemes we might be able to implement to reduce the risk that we face are all the more kind of acutely examined at a board level, I suspect, and I'm sure that our panelists will touch on that quite often they don't feel that perhaps always they're getting the level of investment to mitigate the risk that they face. Before we start, I've asked Alexandros to perhaps set the scene so that we understand ourselves in the room here precisely, where we're coming from and what we understand by risk. Now, that may be a different interpretation to your own, and that's why I certainly would like to engage you in some discussion as we go through the session. So, Alexandros, perhaps you could sort of kick off for us.
Yes. The conversation today, the discussion today will focus in particular to mitigation of risks. But we need to understand that mitigation itself is only one of perhaps 6 basic functions of the risk manager. There are things that are done before mitigation and risk and things that the risk manager is in charge after just defining mitigation measures and all that, strategies. So the first step would be for the risk manager to understand what is his or her risk universe. In other words, what are the risks that are threatening the company? And they have to be very clear, because if they look only at particular risks, these are the only risks that they are going to deal with. And the strategies that they are going to develop for mitigation will be only for those. So there are operational risks, for example, there are people risks, there are market risks, there are financial risks, there are strategic risks. And all these risks need to be clearly understood by the risk manager before doing anything else. And ultimately, the risk manager is not to mitigate 1 or 2 risks, but to protect the reputation of the company by doing his or her job correctly. The second step would be, after understanding all these risks that exist out there, is to develop a system to detect signals from particular threats. They need to have the intelligence in place that can give them information about emerging risks in particular areas, whether it is market, operational, or financial risks. And they need to have this intelligence in place so that they can associate with cases of past crises or detect patterns of emerging risks. Once all these risks have been identified, then the next step is to assess, evaluate these risks. There are different risks, but they have to be assessed in terms of likelihood of occurrence. Will they happen in our company? How many probabilities are there that these risks actually pose a threat to us? And then what will be their impact? And based on this impact and likelihood evaluation, they will prioritize in order to move to the next step, which is what we call risk treatment. And mitigation is one of these strategies that risk managers are using in order to deal with the risks. What is mitigation? Measures, controls that are trying to reduce either the probability of a threat becoming a risk or the impact, the damage that this threat can cause to the company. Do we stop there, though? No, because if these measures do not work, then we have to move to the next step, which is known to most people as crisis management. And crisis management is not dealing with the media, as most people understand. Crisis management can be divided into three elements. One is crisis response, aiming at containing the damage that a threat is causing to the company. Business continuity, maintaining the critical functions of the company alive so that the company can continue to operate. And then crisis communications, both with the media but also internal. Once this is over, the next step would be recovery. And again, this is part of risk management. How are we going to rebuild the infrastructure, the damaged infrastructure after Hurricane Sandy, for example? Right? Do we have something to do there? Yes. How are we going to recover our staff? How are we going to help our staff that has been affected by the crisis that has hit the company? How are we going to regain the business? That's more marketing, but coordinated again by helped by risk management. And the last thing is, having dealt with all these risks, how do we use the learning, the experience that we gained from handling this whole cycle in order to strengthen our intelligence and restart the cycle from the beginning?
Thank you very much for that concise backdrop, and that's really helpful. Thank you, Alexandros. Paul, you have a kind of a global reach, effectively with a big brand. Using the kind of sub-theme here about strategies, do you find that you have to adopt different strategies, or can you, from a company point of view, have a single strategy which fits every situation and sort of follows the kind of analysis that Alexandros was just talking about?
Yeah, we divided up a little bit differently than Alex did, but we have what we call a formula rather than a prescriptive strategy of centralized control and command and control, if you will. Our formula is called TRICS. It stands for, some people think it's not a good idea to base all your safety and security and crisis management on a bag of tricks, but it works for us. But TRICS it's spelled TRIC=S, and it stands for threat assessment plus risk mitigation plus incident response capability plus crisis management continuity and communication equals safe and secure products. And by having a formula like that, we can apply it globally, because it's not limited by jurisdiction, by legal systems, by infrastructure, by we have our largest hotels have a couple of thousand rooms and water parks with 3,000-4,000 people a day going through, and our smallest ones have 35 rooms and maybe only 3 or 4 staff in total. So to be able to, you can't apply, you can't write the safety and security manual and say, here, this is what we've decided at corporate, this is how you do it. But by applying the formula, it can be applied to every single individual location, and it can be applied by region, and it can be applied by corporate. So that's the strategy we have for doing this, not only for the hotel brands, but also for the restaurants, for corporate, and for travel management.
Thank you, Paul. Both yourself and Alex have kind of mentioned the word crisis, and we immediately believe, as a crisis, it's something that's on your doorstep and you have to deal with immediately. But there's an ongoing challenge, particularly because we have this mobile audience of customers who are moving in and out. Some are residents, some are just there for a coffee, some are there for a conference. Very difficult to, particularly in a large property, actually keep a kind of a watch or keep an awareness of everything that's going on, not to talk about your staff and suppliers. And it's a very kind of moving sort of audience that you've got to deal with. Do you find that, I was going to ask Bill if he could comment on the kind of the approaches, because there must be some regularity of kind of risk, which is not so much a crisis, but it's an ongoing risk, which may not necessarily just affect your property, but it may affect a number. And perhaps from the Institute's perspective, you see a pattern on that.
Yes, for many years, there's been organised criminals, we call them travelling criminals, in the essence that they do travel the UK, they also go abroad. They actually start up as organised villains from South London originally, and they then went on to East London, and then they met teams in Nottingham, and then they met teams in Coventry. And the most prolific team at the moment is called the Coventry Falcons. They're named that because they support Coventry City, but that's a shame, that really. But they have the MO of travelling the UK, stealing master keys, and obviously the master key systems have become a lot more sophisticated, but there are still hotels who have mechanical keys. But these people also are after electronic keys, and what they do, they then obviously enter bedrooms, they'll steal credit cards, they'll replace the credit cards that's stolen, especially in conference rooms. They've got access to the conference room at dinner time and breaks. They'll then go to the banks and building societies to withdraw money. Now, as you know, PIN numbers, these people are sophisticated. They'll ring up again the client, they'll ring up various people, they'll actually purport to be police officers, they'll purport to be the bank manager, and they'll obtain the PIN numbers. You've probably seen it recently on the internet. I think it was only a few months ago we were talking about this type of crime. Well, this type of crime has been going on since the early 90s, not 2012 as they try to make out. But, and these people will then go to the banks, building societies, and steal as much money as they can get their hands on. And there's one incident, I'll just tell you very briefly, where a customer, he actually had his credit card, what you call it, your level, your limit, raised by these people. They actually went in and asked for them to raise his credit limit, which they did. The customer himself had been trying for 2 years to get his credit limit raised and couldn't. They'll call up people like Nectar, your Nectar, and they will purport that they've lost their Nectar card. Unfortunately, a lot of people give Nectar the same details as they give the banks and building societies. Maiden names, same, favourite animal, favourite city, and Nectar, unfortunately, may well, and have done, pass those details to these criminals. They have dot matrix printers in their vehicles, laptops, and they already have forged driving licenses to transfer the details onto a driving license for further ID when they go into banks and building societies. We estimate that they earn something between £30,000 and £35,000 per week. Right. So those people, what we do with these, we obviously, our institute, we're aware of them. We have photographs of them. We have a website which we archive these people into. We circulate them as soon as they've committed a crime, like all types of crime or any other threat. Could be, during the summer months Olympics, where we're obviously at the moment we're being hit by South American bag thieves in the London hotels. So we circulate that information to all our members. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I mean, I think that's, in a sense, those kind of threats are not solely directed at the hotel sector, and card fraud and card theft is something that affects the retail sector in its broadest context. Perhaps it's an appropriate moment to bring Joy in, because from an American Express perspective, of course, your customers are global, and I don't just mean that in a worldwide sense, but also global in the sense of who's using the card and where they're being used. So your customers are all over the place.
There was a question. I don't know
Oh, was it? Sorry. I'll come back to you after. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So I think you've seen a change in fraud. So pretty much in Europe, we have secured the card present world by using chip and PIN. It's interesting that Bill mentions the ability to utilise social media to obtain details about our card members, and certainly from our perspective, it's something that we look very closely at. Why would a card member who's been using their PIN consistently over the last 4 or 5 years actually need to be told what that PIN is? And so we do have a number of processes in place that actually identifies when those PINs are being looked at, and potentially identifies the risk to the customer. I think one of the other things that in the UK particularly we've been good at doing through the UK Cards Association is actually educating our customers not to give their PINs away. You do not need to tell anybody your PIN. It should be your private personal information number. It's not necessary to release it to a bank or financial institution when you're talking to them. So I think it's interesting that as we've mitigated the risk and have reduced counterfeit losses, card not received losses, lost and stolen losses, that the fraudsters are having to work and jump over more hurdles in an effort to continue their business. Totally different in the e-commerce world, where we've seen the rise in the e-commerce world, and where we know, for example, the hotel companies want to move into the e-commerce world, which presents a whole different risk scenario from the face-to-face world, where we can control the security of the card with EMV and with chip and PIN. And in the online space and the e-commerce world, we need to be very clever around the fraud protection services that we use to make sure that the fraudsters, again, are going to have to go through several levels of security to actually make a booking, for example.
Thank you. That's very useful. Thanks for that response. We had a question here.
It's more
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. I'm Dominic. I'm Dominic George. I'm a recent graduate from Oxford Brookes University and Development Manager for Global Connect. It's a question that is, I welcome the panel to give a response, but it's going on something that Mr. Fairweather mentioned on this hotel risk management. How does the industry, or how do hotels deal with or try and mitigate instances of in-room crimes, for example, Black Widow crimes, where the hotel in the bar might just see a young woman chatting up a man, which happens all over the world, but then goes up to his room freely of his own will and drugs him and then takes all of his belongings.
Okay, will I start that?
Do you want to start that, Bill?
Right. Well,
you've got the experience of this, have you?
No, we've had this problem. Obviously, it's the oldest profession in the world, of course, we're talking about. Well, I mean, the policies, as far as I'm aware, every hotel group is that no prostitutes in hotels whatsoever. Some people are more lenient towards that. There are obviously corrupt staff and employees within the hotels who will turn a blind eye to it because they may receive money themselves from the prostitutes. You've got to remember, most prostitutes are now run by organised crime gangs. And there's also the fear there of assault by these gangs on staff to allow the prostitutes to get into hotels. Yes, we obviously have CCTV, we have electronic bedroom locking systems that we can read them, and obviously we put that together. I won't mention the name of the person because it's unfair, because he's not here to defend himself. But there was a few years ago, there was an incident where a very top-profile footballer booked into a hotel in Edinburgh, the George, top-class hotel, and he invited a prostitute back to his room. She immediately stole his Rolex watch that his wife had given him, and she then promptly went to the Sunday newspapers and declared her story. She then went to the media with a solicitor, they went to the police with a solicitor and gave herself up. But in the meantime, that top-profile football player had obviously made allegations against the staff of stealing his Rolex watch. So it was quite interesting when it all unravelled itself. So we obviously trying to discourage obviously prostitution in the hotels, and if a guest has had that problem, obviously we're very careful how we approach it with the police. Obviously there may be a family involved. He has a family. We obviously try to protect him from his improprieties and assist him to obviously recover his goods. Because he is a victim, and we should obviously prevent the prostitutes from actually coming into the hotels.
Thank you, Bill. Paul, would you like to, from a brand perspective, and again, you've got properties in different parts of the world with different cultural norms, and how do you sort of cope with this kind of problem?
From the global perspective, we don't differentiate on our policies. It's the same everywhere, and we have a no tolerance policy. On the other hand, it is like Bill says, it's not always easy for staff to to see what's going on before it's happened. I mean, we can't intercept every woman that chats up every man in a bar, because making allegations like that is something you don't want to make a mistake on. So basically working together, and especially in cities, we try to establish and help establish, like they have here with the forum that Bill runs, sharing information, learning about how do these groups work, who's moving where, who's working where is the problem. It helps us put more mitigation in place when we see the risk rising, and then if a crime has been committed, it becomes a police issue, and our role becomes to support the police with their investigations into the crime. But we do a lot of awareness training with staff, indicator awareness, how to pick out not only prostitution, which is a small thing, but any types of crime, abnormal behavior, get it reported so that somebody can have a closer look and follow up that way.
Okay. The one, yep. Okay. I'll come back to have the mic down here. It's interesting because in all that we've discussed so far, ultimately there's a kind of duty of care from the hotel for its customers, particularly whether they're residents or just there for a coffee, because we tend to be more and more into a litigious society. I just wonder, perhaps Philip might comment on whether there have been any patterns emerging about hotels finding themselves in the front line despite all these measures they put in place vis-à-vis their customers. So.
I think it's probably worth starting with the background of the World Economic Forum report, which I'm sure Alex is familiar with in terms of measuring risks in terms of likelihood and impact. I also have a specific interest in relation to cyber, for example, and cyber risk was, I think, one of the top 5 risks in the WF report in terms of likelihood and impact and likelihood. And I think there are obviously some of the crimes that we've already been discussing in terms of people in bars and credit card fraud and those sort of acts that are committed actually within the building of the hotel will continue to occur. But I think what's the trends that are increasingly common are actually these crimes occur without anyone stepping foot in the building at all. Actually what you have is maybe you have a hotel or the hotel chain, they obviously have their buildings and premises all over the world. Linked to those hotels are a series of suppliers. Suppliers may be a catering company, they could be the staff in the hotel rooms, it could be the technology that's underpinned that brand's website, technology that underpins the room keys. The data that is held by those brands aren't necessarily just held in the environments of the other hotel. They're kept in locations, maybe centrally kept in the States or in the Middle East, and sort of, I suppose, the attack surface which hackers may seek to gain access to is not a question of obviously just going to, trying to access their computer on the reception desk. They'll be accessing maybe the databases or the retail e-commerce platforms of those brands. And I think that is an area which is I think the risk has increased significantly, but specifically is grown exponentially as a result of the economic climate we're in, especially that the ability to make these attacks can come from third world countries where they don't necessarily have the wealth some of the developed countries have, but the means to make those attacks are very much freely at hand because they can be done fairly economically.
Yeah, and thank you, Philip. And it's interesting because the economic circumstances in which we found ourselves recently. I mean, organised crime is becoming more. It's always there, but I think it's becoming more targeted in its activities. And there's one area. I mean, we've been talking about card fraud and physical attacks and robbery and things of that nature. But linen theft in hotels, for example, which you wouldn't give much thought to, has become a major issue because there are organised gangs just stealing wholesale the sheets and linen and that a hotel uses. So a big property can actually lose a large amount of it. Now, although it may not own it, the laundry suppliers are having to combat this very much in kind of conjunction with the hotel companies themselves. So it's a very broad array of potential risks and potential attacks that hotel companies face at the moment. So, gentleman here had a question. Yeah.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Daniel. I'm training and development manager for Reception Academy. So I'd like to take a step back to what Mr. Fairweather said about this Falcon, Coventry Falcon. Yeah, that they go to great lengths to take credit card details and copy details, and also the lady said about the credit cards and getting the PIN numbers. I thought it's very clear in the Data Protection Act that you are not allowed to ask anything from a customer or client unless they have given that information to you first. That should apply more to, especially to PIN numbers. You can't even reconfirm phone numbers and email addresses. So how can you prevent something that is the carelessness of the client or the customer? Because if I understand, then somebody would call, for example, Sainsbury's for the Nectar card, and they would not be allowed to give out details such as mother's maiden name or Fravia City and things like that. So if somebody makes this mistake, then how can you, for example, ensure the loss that they incur in these cases?
Who would like to? Will, you want to take that?
I could say a little bit about that. Yeah, as far as Nectar are concerned, we actually contacted them, and they didn't want to speak to us. They were, they actually did not want to enter any conversation regarding prevention of the matter that had happened, and we were trying to make them aware that they had a big problem, that this criminal gang were contacting their company to obtain details of their customers to commit the crime on the credit cards. As far as education, really, regarding people in a moment of panic, for instance, when you discovered that your credit card is missing, you're sitting in this room, you get a phone call, and they say this is Detective Sergeant Smith from Woolwich Police Station, and we have got a person in custody who has your credit card. This is the number. And write out the credit card. They'll give you all the details of the credit card. He said, just to verify it's you, can you tell me the PIN number? And in a moment of panic, unfortunately, the defences are down because you're thinking about how much money am I losing from my bank account, and you think you're speaking to a police officer, and they divulge these details, unfortunately.
I understand that it gives confidence to somebody that they are talking to a police officer, but thinking from a common sense point of view, how would they be able to clarify that it's the right card by giving the PIN number? It's not something that they would have anywhere. So
the criminals will have the credit card in their possession.
I know, I understand. But for example, if let's say I'm a police officer and I'll ask you, so can you confirm your PIN number to me so I can clarify if this is your card or not? I can only clarify if I actually then put it into an ATM to a PDQ machine to actually type in the PIN number and try to either authorize or take some money off. Now, still I understand that this happens because people are scared at the time when this happens to them. But for example, American Express, do you cover for the insurance if somebody gives out a PIN number to somebody else and they lose money about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what you have to remember, there's negligence where a card member may give someone from their family or friend their credit card and their PIN number, and the friend or family spends more than the card member wanted them to. I think there's a whole different scenario where the PIN has been obtained, and the PIN can be obtained in many ways these days. The rise in social media, Facebook as an example, it's not difficult to find out details about card members and details about multiple people and multiple pieces of public domain information. I think there's a lot of people that are duped, and not necessarily in the scenario that Bill discusses, but duped by people saying that they're a courier service and we're just about to deliver your new card. And could you just walk us through your security information, because they're pretending to be the bank. And that has been prevalent in the UK this year. From an American Express perspective, do we refund the card members? Yes, we do. We look critically at every claim we receive, and we'll go into certain investigations if certain activity has been undertaken. But where a customer has been truly duped by the fraudster, it's very easy to make the refund. That's not to say we won't investigate the transactions and talk to the police about the transactions that occurred that are fraudulent. And clearly we have a duty of care to our card members to do that.
Doesn't this allow the probability that even the card holder would commit fraud themselves? Because technically they can say that I'll give my credit card to my girlfriend, say that you go shop somewhere else, then I just report it stolen. And
that's why we investigate every claim that comes before us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. And Bill, could I kind of bring us back to, because we're talking about sort of personal responsibility and being duped as an individual, can I bring us back to the hotel's responsibility and the hotel as the kind of potential target, sometimes inadvertent, but the target nevertheless. Philip was talking about cybercrime, and that, again, it affects all sectors of the economy, not simply hotels. But given the amount of online transactions from booking and searching and everything else that goes on that now take place, and which is such a key feature of the hotel activity, Alexandros, in your sort of research and I know you take part in a number of discussions of this nature. Do you think the hotels are up to speed, up to the mark in actually trying to combat cybercrime, or do you think they're sort of 1 foot behind?
I think, as my friend Paul likes to say, the elephant in the room is cyber. No, I think that the hotels are not doing a very good job in protecting their customers, and all the examples that you have brought are valid, but they are kind of retail crimes. There is another side, which is the wholesale cybercrime. To give you an example, major American hotel chain was sued by the Federal Trade Commission, the US Federal Trade Commission this summer. For the third time, they've lost credit card data of their customers. Their systems were hacked, and hundreds of thousands of customer details, credit card details, were posted in a Russian website. This last hack, the third in the row in the same hotel company, costed credit cards an additional $10.6 million of fraudulent purchases. So, of course, the hotel chain vehemently defended itself, saying that we are doing our best and all that, but it is a recurring issue, and I think that it is a major threat for all the hotels as units, but hotel chains as well, because don't forget that they store when they have loyalty programs, they store all the data of their customers in a server, which, if broken, then all this data is available to hackers.
And is that, I mean, from what you're saying, I mean, is this the biggest risk? I mean, would Philip agree with that? Do you think this is the major risk that a hotel company faces at the moment?
I mean, obviously, there are a number of risks. This is certainly one. I would say it's going to be up there. I would say with the top 5. It may not be the biggest risk at the moment, but it's certainly on the increase rather than the decrease. I mean, just might be help to just explain a little bit more about the legal framework behind the responsibilities to keep people's data secure. There are obviously duties of care, so you could potentially be negligent if you didn't take reasonable measures to keep data secure. The sort of key statutory duty that you have both in the UK and Europe is your sort of obligations under data protection legislation. And hotels or brands, whether it's in the hotel environment or a retail brand, will be primarily data controllers under the Data Protection Act, and they have a duty to keep their customers' personal data secure. And the key building blocks of that legislation are you have to assess what type of information it is. If it is personal data, i.e. relates to a living individual, or whether on its own taken with other data together, that data can be constitute personal data, then needs to be kept secure. The sort of measures you're meant to take, and probably the most important one, I would say, there's sort of 8 principles of the Data Protection Act, but the 7th in particular is you have an obligation to keep that data secure. So in order to do that, you have to have a written agreement with any supplier who's processing that information on your behalf. For example, it might be, in terms of a loyalty program, it may be that a hotel has a supplier that's actually running that loyalty program for them. I mean, we talked about Nectar. I think Nectar's actual corporate name is Loyalty Management UK. Club Card run by Tesco, etc. All of these companies hold a lot of their personal data, and they can tell a lot about people's interests and behaviours and what they purchase, and actually probably more about their life than probably tell more about my life than I know myself. But all of these companies have a duty to keep that data secure, and the volume of data that's being collected for the purposes of marketing and advertising and loyalty schemes is significant. And so in addition to having written contracts with suppliers, you're meant to have design your systems so that they have privacy by design, privacy by default. You're meant to minimize the amount of data you're holding. So in terms of mitigating a risk, obviously if you never delete any data from your system, the data continues to grow. So you need to try and work out systems where you just have a sort of retention policy to work out how long you hold data for, whether you can anonymize data, whether you can encrypt data. And encryption of data is an obvious one. It's a very relatively cost-effective and simple thing to do, but it wouldn't be, I think it probably still goes on a lot still at the moment. People have databases, they have them on laptops, they're not secure, they're going between meetings, airports, whatever else, and that data is completely unencrypted. I mean, no system is going to be 100% secure, but there are relatively cost-effective things you can do to actually increase your security by an exponential amount. Yeah. It's only when you're sort of trying to reach these sort of military grades of security that you have to start spending significant sums of money. Keeping software and systems, having updates on your software and simple things like that are fairly cost-effective things to do and not necessarily very costly. So if a hotel chain is sort of assessing its risk, it can do an audit fairly easily on what sort of contracts it has in place, what sort of measures it has in place to keep things secure. But this is very multidisciplinary activity. It's not just about the legal aspect. It's about the IT. Yeah. It's a human resources issue. CRB checks. It's all about insurance, what insurance is available, and also doing sort of penetration testings on systems. There's a number of things, services that are available and measures that can be taken to prevent these things happening.
Thank you, Philip. Can I perhaps bring Paul in, because again, because you've got hotels in different countries, some which may not have quite as stringent data protection legislation as we seem to have in the United Kingdom. How do you manage that process when you're dealing with different suppliers from across Europe, for example? How do you manage to control that data?
Again, from the corporate side, there's no differentiation on where the property is as to how we secure the data. Everyone has to go through the same process. Just back to the credit card fraud and the hacking thing there, the hospitality industry is the #1 target for hackers trying to access databases to get credit card information or personal data. There's a report that's published every year by Verizon. They work together with law enforcement in several countries, and I think this year the hospitality industry was about 60% of the data breaches that were reported were through our industry. So it's obviously something that's really important for us. And I'm actually going from here to Minneapolis, where at the end of the week we have a meeting in our Global Security Council. And we have a council because exactly like you were saying there, that we need to, it's not only legal, it's not only security, but it's, the information security people, our audit people, our insurance people, our legal people, and security get around the same table, and we look at the threats and what is it that is impacting us, and then, okay, what can you do about it, what can you do about it, what can you do about it, so that we're all working towards the same goal of making sure that we have the best data protection, the best protection that we can have for our businesses.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions of the audience as we're going through? No?
I would like just to
Yes,
emphasize what James said, that it is not, it's a multidisciplinary approach is required here, because it's not just a legal issue, it's not just an IT issue about, it is an information security issue, and this involves also operators, it involves employees, it involves those people who are handling credit cards and data and information. The thing is that computers have become so, part of our lives, but our thinking about fraud has not evolved in the same speed as using mobile phones or whatever. So especially in our industry, we are using technology a lot, but if you ask people what measures are they having in place in terms of, carrying out their laptops from work to home, are they carrying any sensitive information? Is this information encrypted? We haven't developed yet this culture of information security that needs to be at all the layers. Not only, it's not something only for IT or only for security people, it's for everybody working in the industry.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment, because there have been a number of high-profile losses of laptops on trains and buses, and not from our industry, but from the military and from civil servants as well. So it's not as if it's not public knowledge in that respect. And it's interesting. Probably, I think Philip was saying earlier about the investment you require to protect yourself against a military installation is of a different order than you would expect in a hotel. But actually, underpinning that, the mentality should be the same as far as the employees are concerned. So if you've got customer data on your laptop, it's just as important as if you're working for the NHS with all the patient's data on there. So it's the same kind of order of things. Yeah, Philip, you wanted Paul, you wanted.
I was just going to say, it's back to the old security saying where we used to say that companies would use 80% of their resources to protect themselves against the outside, whereas 80% of the loss came from inside failure. So it's a big thing. The weak link is always the people that are going to be there. So awareness and training and things like that will always be at the forefront, because we will always be, for all the IT that we have, for all the information stuff that we have, we will always be a very labor-intensive industry, and there will always be a lot of touch points between with employees and the outside world. And I think, Bill, you can probably correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I've heard that in London it doesn't go very long from the time a receptionist is hired in a large hotel until they're approached by people that offer them to skim credit cards or in some way help them gather information about guests and things that can be used for crime at a later stage.
Yeah, I mean, there is a team. They've been arrested, but they drove up in a Maserati to a 5-star hotel just on the outskirts of London, and they first of all offered the receptionist money. He refused. They then came back and started to threaten him and his family. That's when he reported it to the security manager, and then of course they set up this virtually the trap and managed to arrest this team. We were making thousands and thousands of pounds by either paying money for the data, or in fact threatening members of the staff. Another thing you should be aware of. A couple of years ago, and it still goes on, but a couple of years ago there was a team arrested for attaching keyloggers to computers. They'll come into your business centres, which obviously business centres are open to the public effectively, as well as your guests, and they'll attach logging devices. They'll come into the reception areas and say they're from an IT firm. No disrespect, but a lot of receptionists, they just think, well, yeah, computers are always breaking down, there's always a problem. Go ahead, have a look at them, and they attach the devices. 2 weeks later, they come back. I'll just come back to make sure everything's okay, and they remove the keyloggers. And the keyloggers, of course, have got every transaction, every credit card details, etc. on those. The other thing we've experienced again, and Philip touched on it regarding human resources. Human resources have an enormous task, obviously, of vetting staff, but however, quite a few slip through the net. We've had reservation systems. You've got obviously Paul would obviously hopefully echo this, that where Radisson have the central reservations, which may be taking about 10,000 calls a day, and people are giving all their credit card details. And if you've got a corrupt, dishonest person in your call centre, off goes the information, and criminals will pay them to get the information. Again, staff, night management, they've got a lot of time on their hands. They can also take that information from your data files.
Thank you. You wonder why you're going to be in business, don't you? It's frightening prospects. Joy touched on the UK Cards Association, which has come together in recent years to really to do as much as it can to combat card fraud and to try and be one step ahead of the criminals. But is there a kind of similar group that you find specifically for the hotel sector, Joy? Is that?
No, I wouldn't say there's anything defined for the hotel sector other than the work that Bill and his team do. Yeah. So the UK Cards Association really is a UK industry and coming together of senior people within the industry, looking at the threats and looking at what we can do from an industry perspective. And some of the education pieces I think have been very successful over the last few years, and certainly working with the National Fraud Authority, the segmentation that has been achieved in terms of where are the risks, are they male, are they female risks, are they risks in terms of age banding and the different risks associated with those age bands. We will be doing an additional piece of work towards the end of this year to educate people, and they come in lots of different kind of frequencies about those that are not particularly savvy with computers and how you communicate with those people. And it's a very interesting piece of work that the National Fraud Authority has completed over the last couple of years to actually look at what drives behaviour and how we can actually communicate. And you need to communicate very differently to the 18 to 25 age group versus the perhaps 55 to 64 age group. And some of the work we did is a kind of YouTube viral effort which went down extremely well. And I think, looking at a different way, Andres talks about the way in which payment cards and the way in which we pay for things has evolved. We've got NFC cards in the UK, we've got them across Europe. we're talking about payment by mobiles, our thinking needs to evolve in, everything does not have to be a television interview within a broadsheet newspaper, and that we need to get to people in a different way and use the most appropriate level of social media. And I think that's very, very important. The way you communicate with your card members, and we've at American Express invested a large amount of money in moving to digital experiences for our card members and sending SMSs, using emails rather than the more standard approach that we've seen in the past. So I think very important that we understand different segmentations.
Thank you, John. We're fast approaching the end of our session, I'm afraid, and we'll be kicked out of the room pretty quickly. Just a question there, perhaps, the lady here.
Mariama, I'm just interested, you've raised all the risk issues, but are there any preferred software systems and packages that one might suggest, given that there's this, situation at hand, and while the police and, are doing what they can with the systems that are in place, what can you suggest for the ordinary hotelier?
Okay, do you want to, perhaps each of you, a couple of sentences on that? Perhaps Paul?
Could you just clarify about what kind of systems you're talking about? Are you talking property management system? So you're thinking payment systems and third-party suppliers of transaction payments and... Yeah. I don't think I want to get into that from our perspective. We have our preferred suppliers, but I don't know enough about it to be able to guide you towards this one or that one. I'm sorry. Maybe someone else can.
Anybody else on the panel? No?
I think if you're looking from a security perspective of internet and e-commerce payments, then as a minimum you should be looking at a 3D secure product, and whether it's Visa, MasterCard or American Express, we all offer our own 3D secure payment technology, so verified by Visa, MasterCard secure code and safe key from American Express. So whichever supplier you use, I would be looking to use that type of facility on your e-commerce.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you. There's one question here. And that'll be the last one, I'm afraid.
I mean, I can just make a point in
yes,
relation to that type of query. And number one is obviously do your due diligence, not only in terms of your suppliers, but also on maybe the software you're using, but also in the employees you're taking on. But it may be that obviously there's certain organisations, i.e. the institute that relates to your particular hotel, your brand, will have an organisation who hopefully will have some recommended products. Maybe they can't say you must use this, but they have a list of preferred suppliers. And obviously if you go through that, you might also be able to benefit from beneficial rates for actually licensing that system.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Just one quick question. Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly ask if a risk manager would like to improve their procedures around these subjects, credit card fraud or all of these cyber fraud. Do you have a recommended source where somebody can look for procedures or advice on which direction to go, or?
Who would like to take that?
Well, I can talk from American Express, but
yes,
I'm not sure that I'd be talking for the wider population. I mean, we offer consultative services in terms of a consultation with any of our clients from a merchant perspective. So we would be able to help you from American Express perspective as to what systems you have in place, what systems are open to you that you could use, whether it be in the e-commerce world or alternatively face-to-face. You know, if you're operating in Europe, then you should have EMV, so chip and pin functionality on your point-of-sale devices. In terms of where you go for advice, I mean, the UK Payments website is available, so UK Cards Association. And I think probably if you looked at the NFA and NFIB, so the National Fraud Authority, that would give you some starters. But wherever you have a relationship with an acquirer, so your bank acquirer, so whoever you go through should be able to offer a good consultative service for you.
Thank you very much, Joy.
And I would also just quickly add that from a broader risk perspective, outside of the payment thing and things like that, joining a group like Bill's group here in London, or going through your hotel association locally and putting this on the agenda so that you can share information and best practice is the way to go.
Thank you very much, Paul.
We welcome anybody. You just have to visit our website, which is www.hotelsecuritymanagement.org, and we'd be quite happy to respond to any requests for assistance, advice, help, and it's free, believe it or not.
Yeah, thank you very much. And on that point, just to emphasise that sharing knowledge and sharing experiences is very important in this particular area, as it is in most areas in life. Can I say thank you very much to our panel, and I'll ask you to show your appreciation for them giving up their time to be with us this morning in the usual way. Thank you. And thank you for attending and being such an attentive audience. The Institute's running 3 more sessions tomorrow, so if you look on we'll be in room 19 tomorrow, so if hotel design, hotel branding and marketing, or hotel customer service grabs your fancy, then come and see us tomorrow. Thanks very much indeed again.